It is my great pleasure to be introducing Ben Hansen, the Profit Doctor, today. He is a wealth of information and is really passionate about helping us entrepreneurs build wealth, health, and happiness so that they can start giving back to the community by helping us improve our profitability. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Ben, and I'm looking forward to everything you have to share with us today.
Well, welcome everybody. I can't wait to share some of these tools and tips to help everybody on their journey to getting another 5 points of profitability. So go with me on a little journey right here. Imagine I'm 13 years old and I call my dad to give me a ride to the Florida Museum of Natural History. And casually, me and my friend get in the car and put a paper shopping bag in the back of the station wagon. He doesn't think much of it. He drives us to the museum. My buddy Paul and I and my dad go down to the basement with this little paper bag, and I set it on the desk of this guy way down in the bottom of the museum. He says, "Is that it?" And I nod, and he takes out these giant tongs and takes a hold of this bag very gently and puts it inside this huge glass safety container, and then gently tips it over, and out comes a 3.5-foot coral snake. For those of you guys not from Central Florida, where reptiles are plentiful, you might not know that that is the most venomous snake in North America. And at 3.5 feet, this was a gigantic specimen. The fella's jaw drops open when he realizes this 13-year-old kid on the phone wasn't full of it. And my dad kind of goes a little white thinking, was this snake casually in a paper bag in the back of the station wagon? Well, fast forward, me and my buddy Paul decide we're going to go into the snake catching business. Rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, copperheads, and of course, coral snakes. My mom, not a fan of this idea, and she finally talks me out of it through quality bribery. I negotiate what I call snake allowance. She pays me $15 a week so that I don't catch snakes. Now, what does this have to do with business profitability? Snake allowance, or the idea of getting paid to not do something, or not do something dumb, or not do something poisonous or toxic, is exactly the metaphor for this presentation. What I want to share with you is how to improve your company by releasing the snakes that you already have in your organization and to stop catching more snakes. So with that as an introduction, I want to also share with you just a little bit about my approach for the next hour. What I want to do is I want to give you 100% of what I can do without regard to trying to sell anything or hold anything back. And so as kind of the EO family, I'm going to give you my best stuff, and I'm going to ask for your pinky promise to not take my materials and rip them off, and to also be, really sharing and get to the 5%, because I think that is going to help everybody the most, and to be interactive. So in the chat, if you'd like to put what country you're in and what percent capacity you're operating with. And what I mean by that is, are you going about your day and your company's only operating at like 50%? Or are you guys running maximum at 100%? Everybody's busy, busy, busy. Or maybe 150%. On one of my last webcasts, what I liked was an answer of 111%. So what country are you from and what percent are you running? Again, many EOers love to be running at 150%. And Julie will come back to you and just ask for some of those answers. Let me get the sharing going on here. Okay. Julie, can you see the title slide?
Yep, I can see the title slide, and we've got people popping in from all over the globe. We've got, of course, a bunch in the US, Canada, Austria, let's see, Connecticut, New York, and people seem to be ranging. This is like quick math. We've got Sandra at 150%, but a lot of people are in the 60 to 80% range, it looks like. A lot of USA.
Well, I'm super impressed. And for those
Kenya.
of you
I love it.
for those of you who said 60 to 80%, I just want to make sure it's not that your business couldn't take on more customers, but are you personally, if your full work week is 40 hours, are you casually phoning it, got your work-life balance so cleared out that you're only putting in 20, or are you guys running like max out? But we're gonna move forward, and I want to again just highlight the purpose of the presentation is to share my shortcuts to getting more cash, time, and sales. So what we're looking at right now is a consolidated set of financials, if you will, just showing the profitability line for more than 400 US companies with the $2 to $10 million in revenue. And they're broken out by some different industries. What I want you to take away from this slide is that there's a very broad range of profitability, typically from negative a few points all the way up to about 20, and in some cases even 25 or 30%. I look at this and think to myself, there's 4 quartiles of profitability. The bottom quartile, which is often losing money or to the low single digits. Then the second to the bottom, say 5 to 10%. And then the second from the top, which is in the 10 to 20% or 10 to high teens. And then the top quartile, high teens to maybe low 20s. The purpose of this presentation is to share with you or to introduce to you a set of materials and a set of thinking and tools to help you go up 1 quartile in the next 60 days. Now that is a tall order, and I'll tell you the truth, I'm not sure that this 60-minute session is going to be a minimum effective dose to get you up a whole quartile. I think for most of you, that will not happen. However, at the end, we are going to offer a set of tools and materials that you can get emailed to your inbox for free, as well as a 3-hour seminar that is also free, where we could go through this in more detail, and you can bring a colleague from your company where we could kind of step through step by step so you can walk away with a profit prescription or profit RX to give yourself another 5% profitability. I do want to pause here for just one more second and share what the impact of 5% of profitability could be. So for every $1 million in revenue, another 5 points of profitability is $50,000 a year of additional funds for distribution. Now, over a period of 5 years, that's $250,000. And if you were to sell your company at the end of 5 years for a somewhat typical multiple of say 5x, that would be 5 times 50,000, another 250. So basically for every $1 million in revenue, 5 points of profitability puts another $500,000 into the pockets of the owners over the next 5 years if you were then to sell the company. At 5 million in revenue, that's 2.5 million. And at 10 million, that's 5 million. I'm hoping I have your attention if the whole snake thing wasn't interesting enough. So what I'm going to do here is I want to tell you how the presentation is going to go. Think of it as a T. We are going to do an overview of the entire profit prescription. And then instead of going a mile wide and an inch deep, we're also going to then go very deep in one stovepipe, which is the second one, which I think of as the most powerful, fastest acting medicine that the Profit Doctor can share with you in this short time period. So these are the 4 chunks of my profit prescription, or my total recipe, if you will, to help people improve the profitability of their business. The first is mindset. It sounds counterintuitive because at first glance, you might think, I'm already working on profitability. But what I'll tell you from the dozens and dozens of EO people that I've worked with specifically on this topic is that most of the time, most of them are in fact not working on profitability. Mostly what they're doing is they're thinking about growth, which is how can I get more customers, more of everything. And they're also stuck in operations, focused in the business instead of on the business. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client with a $100 million construction services company, and they were hell-bent on adding another 15 million in revenue over the next 12 months. But unfortunately, they were operating at 3% net profitability. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, you would be so much better off having fairly limited growth or even giving some of that revenue back If you could take that bottom line percentage from 3% to only even 6% versus getting 3% of a bigger number. And that's what I'm trying to share with you here. And at the end, the way I want you to operationalize this first is to schedule 1 hour a week to just focus on profitability. For those of you who might be saying, hey, I really do work on profitability, I just want to challenge you to pull up your calendar after the presentation is over for last week and the week. Well, that's kind of a bad time frame with the holidays. But how about the first 2 weeks of December? And really look, how much time was specifically designated to getting rid of things that were getting in the way of profitability, or specifically focusing on adding more things that were highly profitable. Profit, doing less of what isn't working. This is where we're going to do a deep dive. This is the fastest and most profitable and effective medicine I can offer for you. And the reason that we want you to do this first is because magically it frees up time. It releases cash that you can do two things with. First, you can invest a little bit of that in yourself. Some of you, particularly those who are operating at 90% and above, have been skipping out on sleep, going to the gym, family time, getting a massage, taking a vacation. I'd like to invite you to put a little bit of that time back in yourself so you can be a better leader and have more gas in the tank for the long term. And it also frees up cash, which I invite you to put a little bit of in your bank account and then think about maybe part of that reinvesting in some of the growth strategies. So doing the profit lever first, which is to doing less of what isn't working, frees up time and money, both for you and then for your more effective profit-oriented growth strategies. And that leads us to growth, but not more of everything, specifically more of your best stuff. So what does this mean? In many cases, when we're growing, we're trying to sell everything. We're having all our people selling all our stuff to all our customers. What I would suggest to you is if you laser focus growth efforts, whether that's marketing initiatives, sales efforts, managerial time, on selling your best stuff to your best customers at full price, you might not grow the top line as quickly, or you might even grow faster, but I guarantee that the amount of profit dollars that fall to the bottom will be much higher. And then the fourth chunk of the prescription is what I call Profit CFO. This is things like reformatted financials, so you can actually understand day to day how your business is doing, looking at break-even analysis, looking at top-down in terms of profitability, unit economics in terms of profitability, collections, pricing, discounts. Let me give you an example from one of my clients. This was an amazing, amazing company. $25 million in revenue in the medical field, 45% net profits. You'd think these people were like every day squeezing profit out of that business. Ironically, they were just in an amazingly profitable niche and in fact had not optimized for profitability hardly at all. In fact, month in and month out, the financial reports that they were getting were practically incomprehensible to the senior team. The first thing that we did is I went in there and I helped them tune up their reporting so that they could see on a percentage basis how different things that they were doing benefited them from a profitability point of view, what the costs were on a percentage basis, and then month to month, looking at some trend analysis so they could have some context for what those numbers were. And then, like so many companies, their P&L was 6 pages long with so many things it was impossible to see what was going on in the business. And then some of their big lines like revenue and payroll were just these large, chunky numbers. And I'm just giving you a little bit of insight into some of the things that can be done in this profit CFO world. So just as a real simple thing for financials, including some time series, using percentages as well on your P&L, breaking up the really big important numbers and consolidating the tiny insignificant numbers. Those are 4 steps that could really help you understand what's going on in your P&L. So now we're going to dive deeper into step number 2, which is the fastest, most powerful medicine that you can have. I'll point you to Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, and a couple of things that I would just say. This kind of thinking has in large part been lost in what so many of us are doing and what so many people are talking about. And I think what's happened is that the startup, tech, unicorn, Silicon Valley, software as a service world has taken over our thinking. Those types of companies are almost always, how can we grow at any cost, be a cash-eating machine to take over a space quickly? I'll just tell you, that is the wrong playbook for 90% of folks in EO. If you're in B2B services, if you're in construction or the trades, if you're in product manufacturing, if you're in legal, insurance, medical, all those kind of things, AKA not the 10% that are VC-backed or angel-financed software companies, the burn as much cash to grow as quick as possible has never worked for them. And ironically, in the last 4 years, as things have gotten tighter in the capital markets, even those high-flying unicorn wannabes are really starting to focus on, hey, what is my revenue and profitability for each investment? I want to go back to snake allowance right here. What I'm going to be talking about is by releasing your snakes and not catching more snakes, you can be way more profitable, at least 5% more profitable in the next 60 days. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a series of charts, graphs, and industry research to just prove this Pareto principle will work for your business and to really drive the point home. I think many of you intellectually understand this, but when it comes time, are you actually doing it? People are not actually doing it. And a little bit like Tony Robbins or Joe Dispenza, everybody knows that their mindset has a huge impact on their results. But many of us are leaving the house every morning for the office with a cloudy mindset. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to just drive this point home. So if you just look here, we can see a bell curve. This is the bell curve of performance, and it applies to almost every element of your business. It applies to clients, it applies to suppliers and subcontractors, employees and 1099, marketing investments, sales reps, etc. And we all know that on the far end, you've got your stars, and in the middle, 60% or so, you've got the average performers, and then all the way over to the left, that big X, those are your worst performers, your terrible performers. What we're going to talk about is how to eliminate that chunk marked by the big red X. What I want to share here is when it comes to getting rid of your worst, it's not just a question of the worst having a small impact on your profitability. The trick here is that the worst parts of your organization, your most terrible and toxic customers, your most toxic employees, your worst subcontractors that create all the problems with your customers and rework and so forth and refunds, often they're negative when it comes to productivity, but because they have a cost in terms of time spent, percent of issues, refunds, rework, etc., you've got basically zero input with a significant amount of cost leading to negative profitability for that. So what you can see here is just a numerical example of what I've been trying to share and what I've been talking about. So literally in this case, you've got 7 of something. Again, it could be customers, it could be subcontractors, it could be suppliers, it could be employees, it could be if you're in a services business of the various services you offer. If you're in a products business or construction, 7 of the kinds of products you deliver or the type of work you do. By getting rid of, in this case, the 2 worst ones, not only do you significantly increase the average, but you bump up the total profitability. Along with this, really is going to improve the number of headaches that you have, because associated with these worst performers are 80% of the headaches that you have to deal with. Let me slow down and share an example or two. One of my clients in the placement business or the recruiting business, we started looking at this and we realized that of her 20 employees, 4 of them were terrible. She was trying to come up with all kind of systems and hiring other people and workarounds to make up for the fact that 4 of the people who were in her recruiting team were not delivering. And as a result of that, they were having trouble filling orders. When they realized that by removing 4 of those people and just adding 1 good one back, not only did they save the cost of 3 people, but they were dramatically filling more orders because they had a much better pipeline of talent. So less headaches, that is putting more time back in your day, that is putting more cash back in your pocket by reducing expenses and giving them more sales because you have less of a negative in your business. I'll also share another example from my experience. I also grew a similar type business, except mine was in the staffing business, marketing analytics. We grew from 0 to $13 million in 8.5 years. In the second year, we were already about 4 million in run rate and we're about almost 20%, actually 20% profitability. And as we grew and grew and grew, I was so focused on growth, my margin started slipping to about 7%. So I got 3 times bigger with almost the exact same bottom line profitability. But you know what I had more of? More snakes, more headaches, more terrible clients, more terrible employees, more terrible process problems. And that's what I want to share with you. Now we're going to start digging into a little bit more of how to actually take action and do something specific about this. One more slide. When you request the templates and tools that we will send you right after this, and Ginger, if you would go ahead and put in the chat the link to the materials that we are offering at the end of this, free of charge. This is a sampling of some of that material. There is a white paper that is pretty much a walkthrough of what we're talking about today. So if you didn't like listening to the Profit Doctor to get your evidence, we've lined up Harvard, McKinsey, Deloitte, Gartner, Gallup to talk about how reducing the bottom 20% of customers, product and service portfolio, suppliers, sales reps, marketing campaigns, market segments, employees, can have a dramatic impact on your business. One statistic that I'd just like to bring up comes from Gallup's workplace study. This has been going on, I think, for decades, but certainly for years. They are researching and polling, if you can believe this, something like 140,000 organizations across the world. And their big takeaway message for me is that 18% of all employees on a worldwide basis in this 140,000 company sampling are actively disengaged. So there's like the stars, the pretty decent, the kind of phoning it in, and the ones that are terrible doing nothing, actively disengaged. And half of those, if I recall, are toxic, literally trying to wreck your business. Please, 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 if you could take away one thing from what we talk about today, allocate 1 hour a week to start getting rid of the worst 10% of employees, which are those toxic employees, the toxic clients, and the terrible products and services that are doing nothing for you. I want to start sharing a little bit on how to take action on this topic. What I have coined is the 50-20 rule. It's related to the 80-20 rule, which many of you know, and hopefully you've already started to see this cascading very directly through what I'm talking about, or the Pareto principle. Most people look at the Pareto principle and think to themselves, the best 20% of something is responsible for 80% of the benefit. What we've been talking about is how not only is that true, but the flip side is that the worst 20% is responsible for almost zero benefit. And since it has tremendous cost, is responsible for 80% of your headaches, 80% of your waste. And by getting rid of some of it, could have a huge positive impact on your business. So, how to take action. I want you guys to hit the easy button. Don't try to get rid of all of the bottom 20%. Literally identify the worst parts of your business. For some of you, it'll be clients. For some of you, it might be your employees. For some of it, it might be suppliers and subcontractors. And there are going to be reasons why you can't just lop off the bottom 20% like that. Maybe that toxic employee is your sister's brother. Sorry, your wife's brother. Maybe that's a hard one to get rid of. Okay, let's maybe set that aside. But of that bottom 20%, my challenge to you is to lop off half of them, half of those terrible performers in the next 30 days. Even if it takes you 60 days, you'll be making so much money you won't know what to do with yourself. So that's the 50-20 rule. Lop off half of the worst 20% in 30 days. I had a conversation very similar to this in a Vistage group about 2 months ago with somebody who had a $40 million construction equipment company with 180 employees. The light bulb went off and they were like, bang. I am absolutely certain that 10 and probably 15% of my employees are doing literally nothing. And we're like, well, what would happen if out of that bottom 20%, you released back 10%, or they had 180 employees, 10 or 15 of those employees back to find their true calling instead of being a giant boat anchor on your business. So again, the logic here is imagine your business is a hot air balloon. Most of us are frantically building a bigger balloon to fly further, faster. What I'm suggesting is maybe first you could take some time and cut some of the ballast and you would immediately soar higher. I kind of talked about this before, but we are going to treat the worst first. We've kind of touched on some of these example areas: customers, team, products and services, suppliers and subcontractors. And I've kind of got a bucket here for investments, whether that's sales reps, whether that's marketing investment dollars, or other types of investments. I know we've got to try and experiment, but very few of us are super rigorous at lopping off those bad investments quickly. I'll tell you a quick story that I heard from Jack Daly, who many of you know is a really exciting and enthusiastic sales expert who's, I think, spoken to zillions of EO folks, certainly here in the United States, probably internationally as well. And he said that when he hires sales reps, he knows within the first week whether or not they're going to deliver. Now, I was never as good as Jack Daly on that. And in fact, I usually kept my poor performing sales reps for a year. And oh my God, if I knew back then what I knew now, there's no way that if after a month it was clear to me that they weren't working out, that I would take my chips off that bet and bet on something else. What I know is that for most of you, this 60-minute session is not going to be a minimum effective dose to give you those 5 points of profitability. So I think Ginger already shared, you could nod your head, the link to get to the templates, but maybe you could share that link again. And this is one of the templates. And I just want to very quickly give you just a mini walkthrough. If you can see here, hopefully I won't mess this up again. Here are roughly the 6 things in the last slides, areas to work on. And I would just say, hey, are you excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? So if you're excellent at number 1, you might put a 0. But if you're not very good at getting rid of them, you might put a 3. And then you multiply that and you get a 0. And then you look down here and boom, you're green. I'm just going to go green. Boy, my handwriting with a mouse is not very good. And let's just pretend that when it comes to sales reps, you were like the old Ben and you were kind of poor at picking and poor at getting rid of. Boy, that, oh my gosh, good thing my 3rd grade writing teacher isn't here. So this is red. So then you would write down on the bottom here, sales. You You get my drift. Man, I hope that wasn't as painful for you as it was for me. But this is going to be, I see Brandon, I see you smirking, one of my old forum mates. But what I want to share here is that this is going to be a core tool for you if you want to DIY, do it yourself, to identify which of these 6 areas you should focus on first. If I can, oh, look at this, I'm learning something. I can just go backwards here. Get rid of these before I get to the next slide. And here is another part of the tool set, and I just want to explain it, but fortunately, I am not going to make you suffer with me writing with my terrible mouse handwriting. Let's say you're that client in the recruiting space. You've got 20 employees. You would write down the name of each of your 20 employees. You would put in their manager, and then you would include their contribution. It could be an H, it could be an M, it could be an L. And then you could cascade that over here, and you can think to yourself, this person, let's say it was an HH, these are going to be your rock stars. If it were an MH or an HM, these are going to be your really generally strong contributors. The people who are LLs, these are the people who my strongest recommendation is to try to cut as quickly as possible. If you find that you're at less than 20% LL, I would invite you to just revisit the worksheet before. Are you world class at picking, and are you world class at getting rid of the bad apples? Because if you're not pretty dang good or better at either one of those, it's highly unlikely that you don't have 20% LL. All right, I think I finally learned how to erase this stuff. I'm sure there's a faster way to do it. All right, this is a lot of numbers, and I am super sorry for all these numbers. Please don't get caught up in the numbers. It's really just for those of you who are crazy about numbers, this is here. For most of you, I just want you to listen to the story. Imagine that we were going to, all right, I'm going to do the little highlight thing again. We're just going to start here with customers. Here's a business that is $1 million top line with 10% for materials, 50% for labor, 40% gross margins, and then 20% for customer acquisition, 15% for overhead, and then 5% for net profitability. Boy, I hope you guys, instead of being in the bottom quartile, are in the top or second to the top quartile. And this number looks like 10, 15, 20%. But let's just use this example. So if you use the tools that we're giving you for free that Ginger pasted into the comments, you would use those tools. You'd identify that customer is an area that we really need to focus on, or customer segment. For those of you who are more consumer focused and have hundreds or thousands of clients, you're going to maybe need to take a crack at this more from markets, segments, clusters, something like that. So for example, male versus female, luxury versus budget buyer, large, medium, small enterprise, government versus private sector, commercial versus residential, etc. I'll just give you another example. I was doing a workshop for a group of EOers from the northern United States. They were doing their forum retreat here in Austin, and they were like, hey, Ben, could you come and deliver your profit workshop for us? And I had so much fun doing it. And this one fella was in like the architecture type business. So they're planning for projects and the project management of construction and building. And when we went through this and he looked not customer by customer, but segment by segment, you know what he found? Actually, this would be a better example here for maybe even for services. But what he found was that his government customers, for every, if he had cut 10% of his work with those government customers, since they were getting a big discount, that 10% of the customers was only worth 8% of his revenue. He was spending twice as much effort, twice as much materials to please them. So basically, by cutting those kind of customers, he would have gotten an extra $40,000 back. He would have bumped up his profitability by 4%. Very similarly, just to make that example here in the services, in a very similar fashion, because so much work went into that kind of different service, you know what happened? It was only worth half the revenue for that service for every type of work that he did. What I'm trying to tell you is that when you cut your worst, it has a strong positive impact on your P&L. Here's just some examples. Cutting customers. For every bad customer, you're generally spending more on materials, labor, sales effort, and management overhead. The same can be said for services. Team is a little bit more straightforward because it's usually straight up cost. I think we're getting close to time for Q&A.
You ready?
All right, we're not quite there yet.
Okay, okay.
Well, do you have a bunch of questions?
No, just a few. Keep going.
Okay, start putting in your questions. Okay, what I wanted to show is if this looks a little bit like this, just flip sideways, it totally is. It's the exact same concept. When you start cutting the worst, customers, teams, services, it not only improves your percentage profitability, but your total profits. Let's do a case study, and then we got time to wrap up. Case study. I worked with in one of my coaching groups, a $2.5 million services business. They offered services to commercial and high-end private customers. Immediately, we realized that 20% of their team was very low performing. 20% of their customers were very low performing, and 1/3 of their services, they had 3 service lines, one of which they thought was highly profitable, but actually based on poor utilization, even though they thought the pricing was high, since the utilization was poor, they were losing a lot of money. By cutting on those 3 areas, they got so much time back, so much money back, and so much energy back. The owner was recharged, reinvigorated, and ready to invest in the future for growth. He bumped up his profitability from -10%, basically subsisting on debt, EIDL, and PPP money, to +10%. This is after giving himself a 75% raise. And then with more time and cash, he was able to really fix the other 2/3 of his business. We are going to skip a few of these slides. Key takeaways, high level. The profit prescription can give you 5 more points of profitability. The number one thing you can do is to schedule a 1-hour profit block every week on your calendar to focus directly on profitability, not things that later on down the road might lead to profitability. This is the number one hack, doing less of what isn't working. And Ginger, please include the link to the free DIY templates and the profit workshop. I know you sent me the QR codes, but unfortunately I did not paste them in. So just real quickly, the do-it-yourself templates are 3 things. There's a white paper that is a quick recap of what we talked about here. There is an assessment to help you identify which chunks of your business need your attention most. And then there are templates to go through those chunks that need your help soonest, the worst, on how to identify the low performance, low, value, match to your core values or difficulty of working with. That will help you really reduce the headaches in your business. And then the last one is the profit workshop, January 21st, 2 weeks from now. It'll be 3 hours long. I think numbers 4 and 5 will help give you that minimum effective dose that is needed for you to really put some of these things into play. Okay, boom. Now I can see your beautiful smiling faces, and I'm available for questions.
All right. Ben, do you want me to read from some backlog questions in the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, here's an interesting one related to that profit leakage formula that you had there. What about capturing L and L just to block the competition from growing, like a strategic move? The same person asked, sometimes government is needed strategically, but might not be a high performer type of thing.
That is an interesting move. I can't say for everybody all the time, but what I would say is, boy, it does not seem to me like a good idea to capture all the LLs so that your competition doesn't get them. I would almost tape $100 bills to the LLs that are in your organization so that you could bribe your customers into taking those LLs so they can be the boat anchors and the ballast and the snakes that tank their business instead of tanking yours. Did I get that one, Dr. Julie, or is there more?
I think that's good. It made me think of your spag snake cost thing.
Okay.
How about
Snake
this one?
allowance.
Yeah, yeah, snake allowance. So there is a question here about high contribution and low joy to manage. We got into discussion because we all know we're supposed to cut those people, but there's some case by case discussion. Want your take on it? Smart Money says yes because they're quite resource intense. How do you calculate the output versus cost for certain positions that maybe don't have a clear output measurable? Part of a
Yep.
discussion that happened. What are your thoughts?
Man, I got so excited uh, digging into some of these tools that I kind of skipped over a point. I would start with the easy button. Before I got into worrying about HL or LH, I would make sure that I had gotten through my LLs and maybe some of my LMs. So, what I want to suggest, and part of what makes this so effective and so easy, I don't want to say foolproof, but I will say it's a very robust methodology, is that while it can be difficult to tell the difference sometimes between an MH and an HH or something like that, or an A player and a high B, it's pretty dang easy to tell the difference between an A or a B and a D or an F. So just get rid of your D and Fs. And if you make a mistake and oh, by accident, you accidentally get rid of a C, the cost of getting rid of a C is almost zero. So, okay, next. Mark. Hey, man. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. I think, let's see. I think that's all we have in the chat, but I don't know if people want to jump in. I have some questions of my own,
Okay.
specifically about the workshop that you're doing in a couple
Uh-huh.
weeks. I saw that, as the chat kind of resolved itself, that there were more custom tailored type of questions. Do you have time for that when you do the 3 hour long workshop or
Well,
what?
it's going to depend on how many folks sign up. Obviously, I will do my best. But generally speaking, part of what makes the workshop a workshop instead of a presentation is people get to fill out their sheets during the workshop. Eager beavers can bring them in advance. Um, and then we will step through them uh, and I will help you. A very common thing is what I call being an easy grader. So if you go through, let's say, your 16 employees, and for those of you, if you've got 250 employees, this can still work for you. The first thing I would say is of those 260 employees, it's highly unlikely that you are on a first name account manager type or a first name managerial basis with all of them, but there's probably 10 to 20 that you are. You could start there. And of course, you could cascade this same concept down to the next level of managers and the next, and potentially even the next. So, yes, during the workshop, we will absolutely do our best to help people go, item by item, line by line. I got a little sideways on the easy grader thing. If you're not getting 20% LLs or maybe 10 or 15% LLs with a few MLs in there, unless you're world class at either filtering them out before they get there or weeding them out once they do get there, maybe you're being an easy grader. And I would invite you to go back to the bottom third and kind of regrade.
That makes sense. A question about while we're on the topic of the workshop, can key executives sign up?
I'm inviting everybody to bring one guest.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And then someone else asked on the subject of grading, specifically for customers, what's the general time frame that you give as recommended to grade them accurately? Because could they evolve from an initial assessment of this up or down based
Yeah.
on, a certain amount of time and how they present?
Yeah. Hey, Tiffany. Good to see you. Um, Oh, Robert, we got a bunch of faces here. Hey, everybody, turn on your camera. Give me a shout out. Make me feel like I'm not just talking into a big black void. Um, Now I got a little sidetracked on the question. I think, oh, so
How long would you want to know a customer to classify them properly?
yeah, this this kind of speaks to the mindset challenge of focusing on profitability. Entrepreneurs, and I'll just take an example, like when it comes to staff and hiring, many of those people we hired ourselves, like we ourselves hired them, and we like to think we know what the heck we're doing. And we like to think we're great coaches and mentors, and we can just coach them up. We'll coach them up. We'll coach them up. Or for those customers, just give them another month, give them another day. They're going to figure it out. They're going to come through. You can't raise them over again. I'll tell you, if you've had them for a month or if you had them for a year and they're not delivering, almost guaranteed they are not going to turn it around. What I will just invite you is to get, how long would I invite you to wait to see if they're really going to turn it around? 0 days. I would invite you literally right now to take out those sheets. I don't know if you haven't already gotten them typed in your email address, but I would type that in. And the second I got off this call, I would spend a half an hour filling out those 6 sheets, circle the LLs, call my managers together every Monday at 9 o'clock and assign those actions out so that in the next 30 days, we have chopped off some of our worst ballast, albatross, snakes, whatever you want to call it, that are holding our organization down. The toxic stuff that is so poisonous that getting rid of even a little bit will make such a big difference.
Awesome. That was super helpful. Okay, Amazon and Yahoo are known for this bell curve management process, but the culture sucks. How do you account for that? I believe culture is so critical.
Part of it is when you get a really, so I used to work at Microsoft. Microsoft also had, how can we fire the bottom 10% every year type mentality. They graded on a curve, same as Amazon. In fact, they all got it from the same place. What I will say is that if every year, particularly in a relatively smaller team, you're firing the bottom 10% and you're ranking everyone with a forced bottom 10% curve, particularly in smaller teams. Like if there's 5 people in a team, no matter how good they are, somebody's got to get fired. That can be very toxic to your culture. I would just hypothesize that 95% of the people on this call are so far away from that being a risk over the next 2 or 3 years as to not even spend a minute of time on it. If you're not world class at only bringing in the best and within the first 90 days firing people who are not panning out, and then every quarter making sure people who are delivering with very low performance exit the company, you are at 0 risk of killing your culture by firing the bottom 10%. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. And I just want to say thank you to all of us. We really appreciate all your expertise. I know that you do ongoing consultations with groups of CEOs as well as one-on-one work individually. So maybe for those of you who had further questions, I think a lot of your material was really insightful, and I really appreciate it as the virtual learning chair for the Eastbridge chapter. And to a fellow member of our Eastbridge chapter, I want to say thank you. The chat is blowing up with thank yous also, Ben. It was awesome. You obviously know your stuff, and I just want to give another, if you want more of this, January 21st seems like a great opportunity. We are going to ask you to please take some time to fill out our survey. Not only is this a nice thank you for Ben to give him a rating through EO, it's a 4-question survey. It's no big deal. Asan, our Eastbridge manager, just put the link in the chat. But we are also going to be giving you a recording of this presentation for everyone who registered, along with the link again. Please just take a moment to fill that out. It's 4 questions, super easy. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you, Ben, for sharing all your wisdom with us.